Hello, Robeson County, and welcome to Inside Athletics here at UNCP. I'm Jonathan Bim, sports reporter for the Robisonian newspaper in Lumberton. Joining me once again in the studios, Dolphus Pearson of WNCP TV and Brandon Tester of the Pine Needle. Thanks, guys, for joining me once again.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. So we had a bunch of crazy games in Robeson County, and there was some even in the area. So, I mean, we'll go ahead and preview and recap some of those games. Full moon, I think that might have had to do a little bit with the craziness that happened. And none crazier, I guess, than the Red Springs South Robeson game that me and Brandon went to. I mean, it was 27-22. Red Springs pulls out a last-minute victory. So, Brandon, what did you see from that game?
Well, I saw Denton McKeithen, Red Springs quarterback, grow up a lot. Struggled early on through a couple interceptions, but in that fourth quarter, I really saw him improve, really gain some confidence in those last minutes.
Yeah, he really did grow up. I mean, that's what the coaching staff and the players like Jerome Bass said. I mean, they said that he really grew up. I mean, he's a sophomore quarterback, first time at the position. He was a defensive back last year. And like you said, 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns after throwing 2 interceptions on his first 7 pass attempts. He only had 3 completions the whole night, but none bigger than his last 2. 4th and 10 at the near midfield, he completes a 48-yard pass to get into a goal line situation with a minute to go to Trevez Billinger, and then throws the 12-yard screen to Jay-Sean Carthens, and that was the deciding factor. But I liked what I saw from Jerome Bass. And Dolphus, you really I've heard a lot about Jerome Bass and what he brings to the table. So what do you see with that kid? I mean, he had 2 touchdowns on his big night.
Yeah, definitely. Jerome Bass is a playmaker, 6 foot, 245. Last year, he played a lot of DN. I was told, like D-line, they moved him to linebacker this year. I like a lot of what I'm seeing from him. He just got his first offer from the University of Jamestown the other weekend, much deserved. He's a 2-time conference player of the year. And I really feel like, he deserves a lot more exposure and attention than he's actually getting. He's a great kid in the classroom, has one of the highest GPAs on the team, and I was really glad to see the performance he had on homecoming night. He was a homecoming king, so you can't paint a better picture than that. But, the long interception he had, returned for a touchdown. I mean, double-digit tackles, that's pretty much an every Friday thing. He's a really good player, and I'm excited to see how he develops, going forward.
Yeah, has really good people skills. I mean, he's and like you said, it was his big night. I mean, he had a rushing touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown, kicked the point after on the first touchdown, and was named homecoming king at halftime. I mean, you can't think of really a better way to have a homecoming, your last homecoming out. You mentioned University of Jamestown coach, the linebackers coach, Adam Bean, was the defensive coordinator for a couple months there at Red Springs. He offers him, or they're still in talks about that, but there's an offer on the table for him. And Jerome also has attention from Army West Point and a couple other schools, UNCP as well. So staying local, those UNCP won't really attack that till after the season ends. But it will be interesting to see where he goes. He was the county defensive player of the year last year, and he's well on his way to at least that this year. I mean, he's just a force on the defensive side of the ball. And Lee McClain, we came in last week, said he was, only 173 yards away from getting to 1,000 yards, and that Red Springs was kind of hinting at that was what he was going to get. He didn't quite get there, but still an impressive performance. He was held pretty quietly, though. I mean, around 60-some yards, 66 yards, was held out of the end zone. It was almost like the East Bladen game. He was held to under 100 yards against East Bladen as well with no touchdowns. So Lee really is one of the premier running backs in the county.
Definitely.
And Dolphus, what have you seen from him?
Definitely. I would love to see, this is where we really see the young maturation of a collegiate, running back in the making. Lee he had a rough game last game. 66 yards definitely is not something that he's accustomed to. I really would like to see how he bounced back next week. Confidence level really is a big thing when it comes after a game like this. You're leading the county in rushing. You're so close to 1,000 yards, a sophomore, first year in varsity, things of that nature. So we're really going to see how he bounced back. I love him as a running back. He's 5'11". He has very, very solid size. 5'11", 185 pounds. He still has room to grow. He could end up being a 6'1", 210-pounder by the time he's a senior. He hits the holes hard. He doesn't decelerate in his cuts and things of that nature. For him to just be such a young talent, he's really showing some very mature traits, and I can tell that he's been around either some good running backs or some great coaching, because he's been displaying, an exceptional game this year.
Yeah, good insight there, Dolphus. And Brandon, what kind of fight did you see from South Robeson? After the Jerome Bass interception return for a touchdown, and Denton McKeithen runs a touchdown back, or runs a 63-yard touchdown on the speed option on the outside, Red Springs goes up 21-8 on South Robinson, and then South Robinson answers. What kind of fight did you see from them?
Well, you saw they were very motivated throughout the whole game. They're always kind of pumping each other up, getting back in there, and we saw like Darius Wright and Darius Brown continuing to push that offense into the Red Springs defense a little bit. They got a little frustrated at the end with Red Springs getting a rally there to take the victory, but overall it was a tremendous comeback attempt for them.
Oh, it really was. And, I mean, like I said, against St. Paul's, South Robinson hung around, and you were there, Dolphus. It really just shows that South Robinson's really maturing. I mean, they've got some older guys that are really leading this team. Definitely. And those two senior running backs that you mentioned, Darius Brown and Darius Wright, they're two parts of the three-headed running back tandem or the trio that's really been the tops of the county. I mean, Lee McClain is the top running back, but those three are the top backfield in the county, and I'll stand by that till this season ends because they've really done that. But you mentioned Darius Wright and Brown, but also in that is Jamarius McLeod, who against Red Springs was held without a touchdown for the first time this year. He came in with a touchdown in the first 6 games for South Robinson, was held out of the end zone. But it was a good fight you saw. I mean, they were able to score a touchdown with actually a fumble recovery in the end zone on a fumbled snap, and then they get the onside kick by Darius Brown, just bolts down the sidelines, and then South Robinson ends up going up by 1. And you felt like there was a little bit of time left on the clock there, but then Denham McKeithen and Red Springs really showed what they could do. And now South Robinson goes back home to play East Columbus this Friday night. There's 3 1A teams in the Three Rivers Conference: South Robinson, East Columbus, and West Columbus. South Robinson's already beat West Columbus, and now they take on East Columbus. So this is a playoff clinching game for them. So Dolphus, I mean, what kind of environment, what kind of game should you expect from that?
Yeah, definitely. South Rob, the Mustangs know what's at stake. This game against East Columbus. I feel like the community is really going to be out and lively. Them, having the chance to clinch the playoffs in the 1A is big. They just beat their first 1A team the other week, and now we're talking about them clinching the playoffs. I feel like if they can, have a dominant win against East Columbus, they could possibly get a relatively higher seed and have a good chance of playing more so of an average team, more so than a stacked dominant team first round.
Yeah, and that's what they faced last year. They went to Murphy, which was undefeated, and it was weird how the playoffs broke down. They were a team on the east side of the state and had to go all the way to the west.
Exactly.
So it just was really unfair almost to South Robinson as a team that won 2 games last year. So now they have a chance here. East Columbus is about like West Columbus, a team that's about 15, 16 kids on the roster, really struggling right now. And so we'll see how that game goes. Interesting to see what South Robinson does coming off that loss, the heartbreaker. Definitely. And that was one of those weird games we chalked up to the full moon. Also another game that we didn't see coming that Fairmont had on the road at East Bladen. I mean, to lose 42-38 and actually have the lead with a minute to go, it was really interesting. So, Dolphus, you've seen Derek Arnett a couple times, and he had a really big game against the Eagles. Definitely. And what do you feel like he's doing right now with
Derek Arnett? Like I said, I've said this for a couple weeks now. He has a very interesting skill set. I love watching him play. He's not your average quarterback. He's a smaller guy, 5'10", 5'11", 165 pounds. But East Bladen team that they beat, I mean, just absolute. They went into the game 5-1. Fairmont, struggled last week. Got pulverized against Whiteville.
Yeah.
Jordan Waters was a little quiet. He was a little quiet last game. It was really the Javon Morris show last week against Whiteville. Waters stepped up, had 2 touchdowns, and like you said, they had the lead, dwindling down towards the end of the game. East Bladen just pulled out the win. But Arnett, again, like I said, very interesting kid. I would love to see him get an opportunity. Obviously he's not, going to be a, quarterback at the collegiate level. He might not, he might even be a preferred walk-on, something of that nature. But the kid has heart. He knows the game. He loves the game. And the guys really rally around him. And I would love to see him get an opportunity to play at the next level. I truly would. He's a good kid.
Yeah, solid defensive back as well during his time before being that, but I think he's more of a guy that plays the round ball. He's really a really solid defender. I think he's got some interest on the hardwood. So we'll see what happens with that. But like you said, Jordan Waters had 2 first half touchdowns for the Fairmont. And Brandon, I mean, you saw online where Fairmont was down 35-14 with 4 minutes to go. What kind of fight could you imagine happening from Fairmont with that little time left to come back and take a lead late?
Well, yeah, considering what we saw with Red Springs and South Rob, I mean, pretty much anything's possible then. You kind of expect, a bit of a fight there. So it was still a little bit of a surprise. I mean, a big push there at the end. But
yeah, and then East Bladen, right after Derek Arnett puts Fairmont up 38-35 with a minute to go. It was almost a KO, kickoff return, but it was the knockout punch for the Eagles in that game. And now also happening in the county, much expected, St. Paul's with a big win on the road at West Columbus, 38-6 or 48-6. They went up 48-0, and the 6 points came from West Columbus there in the second half. And it's good to see St. Paul's offense come back. I saw them struggle last week against South Columbus, and for them to hang on there and not have a letdown game or even just a trap game where they're overlooking a team like West Columbus that hadn't won all year. So Noah Wheeler and the offense gets back on track, and we saw Marquise Coleman actually have a sighting this week after his injury. So have you got to see Marquise yet this year?
I haven't. When I covered St. Paul's, they were at South Rob, and Marquise was out. But I got to see Caleb Inman, and I have to say hats off to Inman. He's done a great job stepping up and being that, that leader that they need from the running back position with Coleman, continuously being hampered with injuries. I almost want to say, they're neck and neck when it comes to rushing yards, even though Coleman hasn't played, 2 games due to injuries. But I really want to tip my hat off to Caleb Inman. He's a solid runner. He runs hard. He's small in stature, but he'll definitely lower his shoulder and, try to fight for extra yards. And Noah Wheeler is definitely coming into his own late in the season. He struggled early when I saw him against South Rob. I know he was the reigning county offensive player of the year, so, I went into the game expecting much, high things from him. But he's definitely answered the call later in the game. They're starting to mature. They're starting to grow as an offense, and I definitely want excited to see how they all act when all 3 of them are healthy and, going forward.
Yeah, 3 rushing touchdowns for Noah Wheeler in the win against the Vikings. Lumberton goes to 71st, and much like we expected, a lopsided loss for the Pirates. Their struggles continue that really started after Jack Britt. Then it's just been a downhill spiral for them. Their run game has really struggled. They had what I imagined a guy that was probably top 10 in the county as a running back in Montrez Howell. Montrez has just been virtually not there. He's also been struggling with injuries, so it'll be interesting to see how Lumberton is able to respond. They go to Pinecrest this week. Yeah. Then they have Scotland and Richmond still ahead before they close out with Purnell. And speaking of the Rams, their gauntlet that they went through with Hoggard, Richmond, Scotland, and now Pinecrest is over. Yeah. The Rams followed 31-20 at Pinecrest. It was a slow start for them. Pinecrest jumps ahead 21-0 or 24-0 actually, and they were just unable to come back from that. And they can't afford that now going forward. They've got Jack Britt, which is a winnable game, and Dolphus with Jack Britt coming to town to Pembroke this week. It's really a do-or-die situation for the Rams.
Oh, man, it's definitely a do-or-die situation. Jack Britt is the hot team right now. They won a dogfight against Lumberton 30-24, and then they just go and straight, run through Richmond on Friday. Here's a few things I just want to point out. Brennan Shortridge, the quarterback for Jack Britt, is playing exceptionally well. He's very poised in the pocket. He has great touch on the ball. And their running back, Glenn Young, is one of the best in this area. It's tough, but like you said, Purnell is not the same Purnell team they have been in the past. Luke Oxendine, Chandler Brayboy, those guys are really rejuvenating that Sweat offense. Alderic Thompson at running back. They can definitely go in and really make this a much closer game than anticipated. They can honestly pull out the win. They've had a tough few games these past few games. After the hot start, the 3-0 start, number 1 team in the region and everything, they kind of had a little fallback. So I really feel like this could really rejuvenate the Purnell Sweat Rams enthusiasm and also, set it up for a better second half of the season.
Yeah, and then Jack Britt coming in off the big win over Richmond, 41-20. That was pretty much unforeseen by many in the county. And so we really came down to the end of the show, and we didn't get to the power rankings, sadly, but pretty much a quick rundown. Red Springs stays at number 1, St. Paul's number 2, South Robinson jumps up to 3, Purnell drops to 4, Fairmont to 5, and Lumberton stays around at 6, so the bottom 2 stay the same. It was a good busy week, and we got another busy one coming this weekend, so we'll see what happens on Friday night. For Brandon Tester and Dolphus Pearson, I'm Jonathan Bim. Thanks for the crew in the studio.